Under the frost-kissed moon, a single snowflake traced the path of forgotten oaths, melting into the bloodied earth where empires crumbled. Ilara's breath hung in the frigid air like a ghost, unwilling to depart. Each exhale a fragile rebellion against the howling wind that clawed at the jagged peaks of the Ironspine Mountains. She had been born in the shadow of the throne, a bastard whispered into existence by a fleeting union between a wandering Omega and a prince too proud to claim his seed. No name had been etched for her in the royal annals. Instead, they called her the Unmarked, a stain on the lineage of the 5 heirs who now tore the kingdom asunder in their bid for the crown. The rejection had come not with swords or snarls, but with the cold indifference of decree. King Eldric, her grandfather by blood, if not by bond, had gathered the court in the great hall of Frosthaven Castle, where torches flickered like dying stars against walls of glacial stone. The air reeked of pine smoke and the metallic tang of ambition. Ilara stood before them, her threadbare cloak, a hand-me-down from the servants' quarters, clinging to her slight frame. She was no beauty forged in the fires of prophecy. Her hair, the colour of storm clouds, fell in unkempt waves, and her eyes, a piercing grey like winter fog, held no allure for the alphas who scented power above all. "You are no heir," the king had intoned, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings adorned with tapestries of lunar hunts and bloodied victories. "The goddess marks her chosen with strength, not shame. Begone from these halls, lest your presence taint the trials to come." The 5 heirs, brothers and cousins, each a towering alpha with scars from border skirmishes and eyes burning with the fire of destiny, had watched in silence. Thorn, the eldest, with his mane of golden fur in wolf form, had averted his gaze as if her existence pricked at some buried conscience. But none spoke for her, not even Lyrian, the youngest, whose brief kindness in the kitchens had once shared a crust of bread. Banished, left to the wilds. The guards had dragged her through the snow-dusted gates at dawn, their boots crunching like bones underfoot, until the castle faded into a silhouette against the paling sky. Now, as twilight bled into night, Ilara trudged through the endless white expanse, the wind whipping her face raw. Her feet, wrapped in rags that offered no warmth, sank into drifts that swallowed her ankles, then her knees. Hunger gnawed at her belly, a familiar companion since childhood, but this cold, this bone-deep freeze, was a new torment, whispering of surrender. In her palm, she clutched the only inheritance she possessed, a silver locket, etched with a crescent moon that seemed to pulse faintly in the gloom. It had been her mother's, slipped into her hand during a fevered delirium years ago, before the Queen's own rejection claimed her life in the isolation wards. "The moon sees what kings ignore," her mother had murmured, her voice a rasp against the stone walls. Ilara had worn it hidden beneath her shift, a secret talisman against the court's cruelties. Now it was all she had left, a cold weight against her racing heart, its chain tangled in her fingers like veins of forgotten silver. The forest loomed ahead. A labyrinth of ancient pines bowed under snow, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the rising moon. Distant howls pierced the night, not the triumphant calls of the royal hunt, but the mournful cries of outcasts, perhaps rogue wolves or spirits unbound. Ilara's Omega instinct stirred uneasily. She could feel the pull of the pack she had never truly known, a tether snapped by decree. Her body, attuned to the rhythms of submission and scent, betrayed her with a shiver that was not entirely from the cold. What strength was there in one unmarked? What power in blood unclaimed? She stumbled into a clearing, the snow here thinner, revealing frozen earth scarred by claw marks from some recent fray. Collapsing against a boulder, Ilara pressed the locket to her lips, tasting the chill metal. Memories flooded her, the warmth of the hearth in the lower halls, where she'd eavesdropped on tales of the Heirs' trials, the brutal gauntlets of combat and cunning designed to forge the true Alpha King. 5 had entered the arena. Only one would wear the crown of thorns and ice. And she, the bastard shadow, was cast out to die in anonymity. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke, distant, acrid, like a pyre unquenched. Ilara lifted her head, her grey eyes scanning the tree line. Shadows danced under the moon's gaze, and for a moment she thought she saw eyes gleaming there. Not wolf, but something haunted, burdened, but it was gone, swallowed by the night. Alone again. The locket warmed slightly in her grasp, or perhaps it was her imagination, a delusion born of despair. What is exile, if not the soul's first unravelling? Ilara wondered. Her thoughts a quiet philosophy amid the storm. Strength was not in crowns or claws, but in enduring the void where belonging should have been. She rose, legs trembling, and pressed onward into the forest's embrace. The moon watched, impartial, as if promising revelations yet unborn from this frozen womb of fate. Behind her the kingdom's lights flickered like false stars, and ahead the unknown howled its invitation. In that liminal space, Ilara felt the stirrings of something ancient, a quiet fire beneath the ice, waiting to be kindled. The forest swallowed Ilara whole, its pines standing sentinel like ancient guardians etched in frost, their needles whispering secrets to the wind that tore at her cloak. Each step sank deeper into the snow, a relentless pull toward the earth's frozen heart, mirroring the ache blooming in her chest. The locket swung against her skin, a pendulum of silver moonlight, its crescent etching a faint glow that seemed to mock her solitude. She had always been the unseen thread in the kingdom's tapestry, woven in but never claimed. Now, unraveling in the wilds, she wondered if the goddess truly favored the marked, or if the unmarked were the true vessels of hidden tempests. Night deepened, the moon climbing higher, casting elongated shadows that danced like spectres across the glade. Distant UIV howled again, closer this time, laced with a raw edge, not the pack's unified cry, but a lone lament fractured by pain. Ilara froze, her breath catching in her throat, the cold air sharpening her senses until every rustle felt like a predator's approach. Omega instincts, dormant in the castle's stifling confines, surged unbidden, a warmth low in her belly, a pull toward the unknown that both terrified and tantalized. She clutched the locket tighter, its chain biting into her palm, grounding her against the urge to flee or yield. From the tree line burst a figure, not shadow but flesh, staggering into the clearing with the gait of one hunted. He was massive, even in collapse, an alpha forged in the fires of royal blood, his furred cloak torn and matted with crimson streaks that seeped through the fabric like accusations. Broad shoulders heaved under the weight of exhaustion, and as he turned, moonlight revealed a face carved from granite and grief, high cheekbones scarred by old battles, eyes the color of storm-tossed seas, burning with a feverish intensity. Thorn, the eldest heir, the golden wolf, whose name evoked both valor and the whispers of a crown deferred. But this was no triumphant prince. His left arm hung limp, bound crudely with strips of his own cloak, and the scent of him, musk and iron, blood and smoke, wafted toward her on the wind, thick with the tang of betrayal. He did not see her at first, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if chasing ghosts. A snarl escaped his lips, low and guttural, as he slumped against a snow-laden trunk, the impact sending a cascade of white powder cascading like fallen stars. Ilara's heart thundered, a visceral drumbeat echoing the distant howls. Fear coiled in her gut. Thorn, who had looked away in the great hall, who bore the weight of 5 brothers' ambitions on his noble brow. What curse had the trials wrought upon him? She should run, melt into the night as the unmarked were meant to, yet curiosity, that forbidden spark, rooted her feet. The locket pulsed warmer now, undeniably, as if the moon itself urged her forward. Their eyes met across the clearing, his widening in shock, hers narrowing against the instinctive flood of recognition. Alpha and Omega, blood of the same forsaken line, yet worlds apart. Thorn's scent enveloped her, a storm of dominance laced with vulnerability, stirring something primal she had long suppressed. Submission, no. Something fiercer, a mirror to his own unraveling. He rose unsteadily, hand reaching for a dagger at his belt, but his movements faltered, pain etching lines deeper into his face. Who? What are you? His voice was a rumble, edged with suspicion, the words slurring slightly from blood loss. Not the commanding timbre of court, but a raw plea masked as threat. Elara stepped back, the snow crunching like brittle bones, her grey eyes locking onto the wound at his side, a gash from claw or blade. Weeping dark against the white. No one, she whispered, the truth a shield, just a shadow from the castle you all cast out. Fear warred with the pull, her body betraying her mind. She could feel the bonds whisper, instinctive and denied, born not of desire, but of shared exile's cruel poetry. Why him? The heir who had averted his gaze, now bleeding in the wilds, his golden aura dimmed by whatever treachery stalked the trials. The 5 heirs had entered the gauntlet united. Now, one fled alone, marked by guilt she could almost taste, like ash on the wind. Thorn's laugh was bitter, devoid of mirth, as he pressed a hand to his side, blood staining his fingers ruby under the moon. "The bastard," he murmured, recognition dawning like a reluctant dawn. Elara, the unmarked. He did not lunge, did not command. Instead, he slid down the trunk, breath ragged, the weight of his duty crashing like waves. Flee, then. The shadows hunt me. Rivals in the trials, poisoned by ambition. Lyrian. He turned, or was turned. The crown devours its own. His eyes, haunted by the ghosts of oaths broken, flicked to the locket glinting at her throat. For a moment, something softened in his gaze. Curiosity mirroring hers, a bridge across the chasm of their stations. She hesitated, the wind howling its warning, carrying the faint clamour of pursuit, snapping branches, muffled snarls. The connection hummed between them, denied by reason, he, the ethical king-in-waiting, burdened by the duty to lead without stain. She, the Omega, forged in rejection's forge, her empathy a quiet rebellion. What strength was there in aiding the fallen heir when her own survival hung by a thread? Yet the locket burned against her skin, a symbol of truths kings ignored. And in his pain, she glimpsed her own, the unravelling of souls under the same merciless moon. As the howls drew nearer, Thorn extended his good hand, not in command but in quiet desperation. The forest offers no mercy to the lone. Stay or go. But know this, every wound carves the path to redemption. Ilara's choice trembled on her lips, fear and curiosity entwining like vines in the snow as the night closed in, promising trials yet to unfold. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The snow-laden pines closed around them like the jaws of an ancient beast, their branches interlocking to form a fleeting canopy against the moon's unyielding gaze. Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears, a frantic rhythm that drowned the approaching snarls as Thorn's words hung between them. Redemption's fragile thread, spun from blood and desperation. She could flee into the labyrinth of white, vanish as the unmarked were destined to, her locket the only witness to her solitude. Yet his eyes, storm-grey and fractured by the weight of unspoken sins, pulled at her like the tide of the wilds. Empathy, that quiet traitor, stirred in her chest, blooming amid the fear. He was no longer the distant heir, but a mirror to her own exile, his golden promise tarnished by the same indifferent fate. Run if you must, Thorn rasped again, his voice a gravelly echo against the wind, but his extended hand trembled, not with command, but with the raw vulnerability of one who had led packs to glory, only to bleed alone. The scent of his wound sharpened, coppery and insistent, mingling with the earthy musk of alpha essence that clawed at her omega senses, urging submission she refused to yield. Ilara's fingers tightened around the locket, its silver crescent warming her palm like a hidden ember, as if the moon whispered of bonds forged in frost, not fire. The howls crescendoed, closer now, 3, perhaps 4 voices weaving a net of pursuit, laced with the feral hunger of rivals, scenting weakness. She moved before thought could chain her, darting to his side with a swiftness born of shadowed corridors and evaded cruelties. Her small hands pressed against his uninjured shoulder, steadying him as he rose, his bulk leaning into her like a felled oak seeking root. "Not alone," she murmured, the words escaping unbidden, a defiance against the decree that had stripped her bare. Together they plunged deeper into the forest, the snow yielding under their hurried steps, each crunch a betrayal of their flight. Thorn's breath came in laboured bursts, hot against her neck as he guided her toward a ravine hidden by overhanging evergreens, his good arm encircling her waist, not possessively but as an anchor in the storm. The contact ignited something visceral, the chill of his skin through torn fabric, the faint tremor of pain rippling through muscle honed by trials she had only glimpsed from afar. The ravine opened like a wound in the earth, its walls sheer cliffs of ice-veined rock descending to a narrow ledge where a cave mouth yawned, black as forgotten oaths. They tumbled inside, the darkness swallowing them whole, broken only by the faint glow of phosphorescent fungi, clinging to the walls like lunar tears. Ilara eased Thorn to the ground, her cloak, threadbare as it was, torn free to bind his gash, the fabric soaking crimson as she worked with steady hands, the metallic tang filling her nostrils, evoking the court's hidden slaughters she had cleaned in silence. He watched her, his chest rising and falling in sync with hers, the alpha fire in his eyes dimmed to embers of gratitude and guilt. "Why?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the stone, echoing the distant clash of pursuit outside, snarls turning to frustrated bays as the hunters circled the ravine's edge. She paused, the locket slipping from her grasp to dangle between them, its chain catching the dim light like a silver vein pulsing with secrets. "Because the moon doesn't choose sides," Ilara replied, her grey eyes meeting his without flinching. The words, a philosophy carved from years of invisibility. "It simply endures." Her fingers brushed his scar-laced jaw as she adjusted the makeshift bandage, and in that touch, empathy unfurled, tendrils weaving through the chasm of their worlds. She saw the fractures in him, the eldest heir, ethical to a fault, who had borne the burden of 5 brothers' rivalries, his melancholy a crown heavier than iron. Guilt shadowed his features, not for her rejection, but for the trial's cruelties he had endorsed in duty's name, the gauntlets where claws rent flesh and ambitions poisoned wells. Lyrian, the youngest, turned traitor under whispers of a rival alpha's influence, a betrayal that now hunted them both. Outside, the wind howled its fury, carrying the crack of branches and the guttural commands of the pursuers. Shadow wolves loyal to the other heirs, their sense a foul mix of ambition and deceit. Thorn tensed, his instinct surging despite the wound, a protective growl building in his throat as he pulled Ilara closer, shielding her with his frame. The cave's chill seeped into her bones, but his warmth pressed against her side, a bulwark of muscle and resolve, stirring the bond's insistent hum. It was not love's blaze, but a slow thaw, curiosity hardening into trust, fear yielding to the shared rhythm of their breaths. She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder, inhaling the layered scents of blood, pine, and something deeper, the quiet honor of a king unbroken by betrayal. A stone clattered at the ravine's lip, and shadows flickered in the moonlight filtering through the entrance. Thorn's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with a gentleness that belied his strength, the locket trapped between their palms like a vow etched in silver. "They come for the crown's fragments," he whispered, his breath stirring her hair. "But in this darkness we forge our own light." Ilara nodded, her heart a steady drum against the encroaching threat, the empathy between them solidifying into a bond as unyielding as the ice walls around them. The pursuers' howls peaked, claws scraping stone. But within the cave's womb, a fragile alliance took root. Two exiles against the storm, their wounds mirroring paths to mutual salvation. As the first shadow lunged into the ravine, Thorn rose with a snarl, drawing Ilara behind him, the locket's glow seeming to brighten, a beacon against the encroaching night. In that moment, under the moon's distant watch, she felt the stirrings of purpose, not as the unmarked, but as the one who could mend what kings had shattered. The clash echoed through the stone, blood and breath mingling in the air as their refuge became a crucible, testing the fragile thread of connection woven from pain's unyielding forge. What is refuge, if not the soul's quiet rebellion against the hunt? Ilara thought, her resolve hardening like frost under dawn, as the bond between them deepened, promising revelations born of shared fire amid the endless winter. The cave's maw trembled with the fury of the assault, shadows lunging like vengeful spectres into the ravine's throat, their claws scraping ice-veined stone in a cacophony that echoed the kingdom's fractured heart. Ilara pressed against the damp wall, her breath shallow and ragged, the metallic bite of Thorn's blood still clinging to her fingers like an unspoken oath. The locket dangled between them, its crescent moon now pulsing with an inner light that defied the gloom, a soft, ethereal glow that painted their faces in silvered hues, as if the goddess herself had exhaled upon the silver. Outside, the pursuers' howls twisted into snarls of triumph. 3 rogue wolves from the trial's underbelly, their eyes gleaming with the red hunger of betrayal, loyal to Lyrian's poisoned whispers and the rival heir's grasping claws. Thorn surged forward, his wounded form a bulwark of raw alpha might, the makeshift bandage already darkening with fresh crimson. His growl reverberated through the chamber, a primal thunder that shook loose pebbles from the ceiling. But pain laced his movements, slowing the lethal grace that had felled foes in the gauntlets. When Shadow, a sleek beta with fur matted by the snow's cruel kiss, leaped first, jaws snapping toward Thorn's throat. He met it mid-air, his good arm clamping around the beast's neck in a vice of muscle and fury, twisting until bone cracked like winter branches underfoot. Blood sprayed, warm and viscous, splattering Ilara's cheek, its coppery warmth a stark contrast to the cave's biting chill. The air thickened with the sense of exertion and death, pine sap from the walls, the acrid tang of fear sweat, and the underlying musk of alpha dominance now frayed at the edges. But they were outnumbered. The second wolf circled, its breath fogging the air in guttural pants, while the third prowled the ledge above, blocking escape. Thorn staggered back, a gash reopening across his ribs, his storm-grey eyes flickering with the grim calculus of survival. Ilara's heart clenched, not in terror alone, but in a deeper unravelling. The sight of him, the ethical heir burdened by guilt's heavy mantle, fighting not for glory, but for the fragile sanctuary they had carved from exile's jaws. What was strength, if not the choice to shield the unworthy? Her Omega instinct screamed to submit, to curl into the shadows, but the locket burned against her chest, an insistent heat that seeped into her veins like moonlight distilled into fire. As the second wolf lunged, time fractured. Ilara's vision blurred, the cave's confines dissolving into a tapestry of silver threads, veins of light weaving through the stone, illuminating hidden crevices and forgotten paths that snaked deeper into the mountain's belly. It was no mere trick of the dim fungi. This was revelation, a surge from within her, unbidden and ancient, as if the moon had claimed her blood as its own. The locket flared brighter, its glow spilling outward like spilled mercury, tracing luminous lines that revealed a narrow fissure behind a jutting boulder, concealed until now by shadows, deceit. Her mind raced with whispers, not her own, but the goddess's breath. Paths unseen, destinies forked like lightning over the iron-spine peaks. Pathfinder. The word echoed in her soul, a title long dormant, born of her unmarked lineage. The bastard's gift to navigate the webs of fate where kings stumbled blind. "Thorn!" Her voice cut through the chaos, steady and commanding, laced with a timbre she had never wielded. She pointed, the silver light following her gesture, illuminating the escape like a divine arrow. He turned, his eyes widening, not in command, but in awe, the alpha fire reigniting as he grasped her meaning. With a roar that shook the air, he seized the fallen wolf's corpse and hurled it at the attackers, buying precious seconds. Ilara darted forward, her small frame slipping through the fissure first, the stone's chill grazing her skin like accusatory fingers. Thorn followed, his bulk forcing the gap wider with a grind of rock, blood trailing in ruby streaks that the moonlight transmuted to silver. They emerged into a larger cavern, its ceiling vaulted like a temple to forgotten moons, stalactites dripping with meltwater that echoed like distant tears. The glow from the locket lingered, a halo around Ilara's form, revealing not just stone but visions. Fleeting images of the trial's heart, the arena in Frosthaven where the 5 heirs had clashed. Thorn's golden wolf form bloodied by Lyrian's treacherous strike, a poisoned dagger glinting under torchlight, and deeper still, a prophecy unfurling. The crown, not of iron, but of woven thorns and ice, resting empty on the throne, awaiting one who bore no mark of ambition, but the quiet light of redemption. Ilara gasped, the visions crashing over her like a winter tide, her body trembling with the weight of it. The Dom Occulto, the Pathfinder's sight, her mother's legacy hidden in the locket's embrace, a gift to guide the lost through moral tempests where power blinded all. Thorn collapsed against the far wall, his breath heaving, but his gaze fixed on her with a reverence that pierced her core. "You... how?" His voice was a hushed reverence, the melancholy king-in-waiting seeing beyond the unmarked omega to the key etched in stars. Guilt shadowed his features, deepened by the realization he, who had averted his eyes in the great hall, now beheld the one the goddess had woven into his fate. The betrayal of Lyrian, the rival's hunt, it was no mere ambition's game, but a unraveling of the kingdom's soul, and she, Ilara, held the thread to mend it, not through claws or crowns, but through paths of compassion, revealing truths that duty had buried. The bond between them hummed stronger, no longer denied but acknowledged, a spiritual tether, romantic in its tragic purity, born of shared wounds under the moon's impartial eye. She knelt beside him, the locket cooling against her skin, its light fading to a gentle pulse. The distant howls echoed faintly now, the pursuers confounded by the vanished trail, but the true confrontation loomed. The past's ghosts, the choice between forgiving the trial's sins or waging war on the pack that had cast her out. Ilara traced the scar on his jaw, her touch a balm of empathy, feeling the ethical core of him, the alpha who carried guilt like a second skin, now glimpsing redemption not as reward, but as proof in her light. "The moon reveals what blood conceals," she whispered, her grey eyes mirroring his storms. In that cavern's hush, with wind sighing through cracks like the breath of spirits, Thorn took her hand, the weight of destiny settling upon them both. She was no longer the shadow, she was the beacon, and in her awakening the kingdom's fate trembled on the edge of Renascimento. Yet doubt lingered in her heart, a philosophical thorn. Was this gift a blessing or a chain, binding her to the throne that had rejected her? The locket warmed once more, as if urging faith against the despair of what was to come, the judgment awaiting in the snow-swept heights, where love demanded sacrifice, not surrender. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The cavern's vaulted hush gave way to the mountain's restless breath, draughts whispering through fissures like the sighs of buried ancestors carrying the faint, acrid scent of smoke from distant pyres. Ilara's fingers lingered on Thorn's scarred jaw, the warmth of his skin a fleeting anchor against the visions that still flickered at the edges of her sight, silver threads of fate weaving through stone, revealing not just paths but the jagged scars of the past. The locket rested heavy between her breasts, its crescent moon now a quiet sentinel, pulsing with the rhythm of her quickened heart. She had glimpsed the trial's heart, Lyrian's blade, poisoned by a rival's cunning, striking not for glory, but to shatter the pack's ethical core. Thorn, the eldest, had borne the guilt of it all, endorsing the gauntlet's brutality in the name of duty, his melancholy a veil over the choices that had led to betrayal. "We cannot hide forever," Thorn murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the damp stone, his storm-grey eyes searching hers with the weight of unspoken confessions. He rose slowly, the fresh wounds pulling at him like chains, but his frame straightened with the resolve of one who had led hunts under blood moons. The air between them thickened, charged with the bond's insistent pull. Not a blaze of passion, but a slow forge of empathy, resisted by the ghosts of rejection and duty. Ilara felt it in her bones, the Omega's instinct to yield warring with the Pathfinder's clarity, her gift demanding she confront the kingdom's unraveling, not flee it. The mountains stirred, a low tremor shaking loose rivulets of meltwater that pattered like hesitant tears. Visions surged again, unbidden, the pack converging on Frosthaven's frozen arena, the remaining heirs, two brothers and a cousin, their alpha's sense laced with ambition's rot, closing ranks against the traitor Lyrian, whose youthful face twisted in shadows of manipulation. But deeper, the Matilha's heart, elders whispering of the unmarked bastard, Ilara herself, as the omen that had cursed the trials. They hunted not just Thorn, but the fracture she represented, freedom from the throne's iron grip or war to reclaim it. Her choice loomed moral and merciless. Forgive the pack that had cast her into exile, or wield her sight to ignite a conflagration that would consume them all. They emerged from the cavern's womb into a narrow pass, the iron spine peaks clawing at the sky like the spines of some colossal beast. Snow swirled in eddies, the wind's howl a dirge that masked the crunch of approaching paws. Thorn's hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining with a gentleness that belied his warrior's build, the contact sending a shiver through her, not cold, but the raw electricity of shared vulnerability. "The judgment comes," he said, his breath fogging the air between them, eyes reflecting the moon's pale fire. "Lyrian leads them now, puppet to Varrock, the cousin whose greed poisoned the wells of our blood. They seek my head to claim the crown unchallenged." Ilara's grey eyes narrowed against the blizzard's assault, her locket warming as the Pathfinder's gift unfurled once more. Silver threads bloomed in her vision, tracing the pass's hidden ledges, ambush points where the Matilla lurked, their scents a foul bouquet of betrayal and frost. She saw Lyrian clearest, the youngest heir, once kind with stolen bread in the kitchens, now hollow-eyed. His betrayal a scar deeper than any claw. Varrock's influence coiled around him like smoke, promising power over the pack's ancient rights. But at the cost of the goddess's lunar balance, The Matilha followed, not out of loyalty but fear, elders clinging to traditions that demanded pure blood, rejecting the bastard's shadow as heresy. The confrontation erupted without mercy. Figures materialized from the white veil. Lyrian first, shifting to wolf form mid-stride, his pelt a mottled grey, streaked with the crimson of recent kills, eyes wild with coerced fervor. Behind him Varric, towering, his fur black as midnight oil, scars from border wars gleaming like accusations, and a cadre of pack warriors, their howls a unified thunder that shook snow from the cliffs. Thorn shoved Ilara behind a jutting outcrop, his body a shield of rippling muscle, but she stepped forward, the locket flaring like a star against her chest. "No," she commanded, her voice cutting the gale, laced with the ancient timbre of her awakening. The silver light spilled from her, illuminating the pass in ethereal veins, revealing not just the attackers, but the fractures in their ranks. Warriors hesitating, sense of doubt mingling with aggression. Lyrian skidded to a halt, his wolf form rippling back to man, naked and shivering, his youthful face contorted in anguish. "Thorn, brother," he rasped, voice cracking like thin ice, the poison's residue etching lines of torment around his eyes. Varric promised salvation for the pack. "End the trial's curse. Claim the crown without your ethical chains." Varric snarled beside him, shifting partially, claws extended, his gaze flicking to Ilara with predatory calculation. "The bastard witch!" he spat. The words of venom that stirred the warrior's growls. "Her sight mocks the goddess's marks. Kill her, and the moon's favor returns." Thorn's growl built, a seismic force, but he held, his hand squeezing Ilara's in silent plea. Love or freedom, forgiveness or war. The choice tore at her, the pact that had decreed her death, now embodied in Lyrian's trembling form and Varric's unyielding ambition. Her gift, whispered paths, one of slaughter, silver threads snapping lives like twigs, freeing Thorn to reclaim the throne through blood. Another of revelation, exposing Varric's deceit to shatter the Matilha's unity without a single claw drawn. But freedom meant abandoning the bond, vanishing into the wilds as the unmarked. Her light dimmed by isolation. Love demanded she forgive, weaving compassion into the pack's fractured soul, risking all for redemption's fragile proof. Blood sprayed first from a warrior's ill-timed lunge, Thorn's fist connecting with bone in a visceral crack, the crimson blooming against the snow like a rose frozen in time. Ilara's vision sharpened, the locket burning as she traced a thread toward Lyrian, illuminating the poison vial hidden in Varric's pelt, a relic from forbidden alchemies, tainting not just body, but the spiritual oaths of the crown. "See!" she cried, her voice a clarion amid the fray, the silver light coiling around the traitor like accusing vines. Lyrian's eyes widened, horror dawning as the truth pierced his manipulated haze. Varric roared, charging, but the warriors faltered, sense shifting from hunt to confusion, howls fracturing into uncertain whines. In the chaos, Ilara faced Lyrian across the bloodied snow, her small frame unbowed, the wind whipping her storm-cloud hair like a banner of defiance. "You shared bread with me once," she said, her words a bridge over the chasm of betrayal. Empathy threading through the pain. Was that lie, or the truth ambition buried? He collapsed to his knees, tears freezing on his cheeks, the moral dilemma etching his features. Freedom from Varric's grasp, or war to preserve the poisoned path? Thorn fought at her side, not dominating but guarding, his ethical core gleaming in the moonlight. Guilt for the trial's sins, now fueling a choice for mercy over conquest. Varric lunged, claws raking air inches from her throat, but Ilara's gift bent the threads, a silver barrier shimmering into existence, hurling him back against the cliff with a thud that echoed like judgment's gavel. The Matilha surged, torn between loyalty and revelation, their howls a cacophony of the soul's unraveling. Ilara's heart thundered, the weight of decision crushing. Forgive and bind the pack in redemption's light, or sever ties, claiming liberty at the cost of Thorn's haunted gaze. Blood slicked the snow, mingling with tears, the moon bearing witness to the ethical forge, where compassion clashed with the wild's raw call. As Varrock rose, snarling, promising vengeance that would echo through the peaks, Ilara extended her hand to Lyrian, the locket's glow enveloping them all, a beacon of potential renascimento, or the prelude to war's eternal winter. What is judgment, if not the heart's crucible, where love demands the forgiveness that freedom denies? In that suspended breath, under the indifferent stars, her choice trembled, the kingdom's fate balanced on the edge of her unclaimed blood. The snow-choked pass became a theatre of fractured souls, the wind's wail a lament for oaths dissolved in blood and frost. Ilara stood at the precipice of choice, her hand outstretched to Lyrian, the locket's silver glow weaving through the blizzard like threads of moonlight mercy. Varrock's snarl ripped the air, his black-furred form coiling for another strike, claws glinting with the red promise of vengeance, but the Matilla wavered behind him, their howls splintering into uneasy whines, scents shifting from feral unity to the sour tang of doubt. Thorn's presence burned at her side, his body a taut shield of muscle and restrained fury, his breath sinking with hers in the gale, a silent vow that the bond they had forged in exile's crucible would not yield to war's devouring maw. Her grey eyes, storm-forged and unyielding, locked onto Lyrian's kneeling form, the youngest heir's face a map of torment. Tears carving frozen paths down cheeks pale as the snow, his body trembling not from cold, but from the unravelling of ambition's poison. The Pathfinder's gift surged within her, visions cascading like an avalanche, silver veins illuminating the pack's hidden fractures, the Elder's rigid traditions chaining them to a throne stained by rejection, and deeper still, the kingdom's soul, a vast web of lunar rites where compassion could mend what claws had torn. The locket pulsed against her chest, hot as a hidden flame, its crescent etching her skin like a brand of destiny. What was freedom, if it meant wandering the wilds alone, her light dimmed to a ghost's flicker? Love demanded more, not surrender, but the sacrifice of her unmarked solitude for the healing of wounds she had never inflicted. Varrock lunged, a shadow of midnight fury, his jaws parting in a roar that shook loose cascades of ice from the cliffs above. Ilara's vision sharpened, the silver threads coiling around him like accusatory serpents, binding his limbs mid-air and slamming him to the bloodied earth with a thud that echoed through the peaks. The Matilda gasped, a collective intake of breath that hung in the frozen air, their eyes widening as the light revealed the vial's dark residue on his fur, the forbidden alchemy that had twisted Lyrian's will, tainting not just flesh, but the spiritual oaths binding Alpha to pack, king to goddess. "See the truth!" Ilara's voice rang out, steady and resonant, carrying the timbre of ancient moons, cutting through the storm like a blade of pure intent. Varrock's greed poisons the blood we all share. The crown is not won by betrayal, but by the choice to heal what duty broke. Lyrian rose unsteadily, his hand grasping hers, the contact a spark that ignited the bond's full bloom. Not immediate fire, but a slow, rationalized acceptance, resisted through years of exile's isolation, and now embraced as redemption's proof. Tears thawed in his eyes, the poison's haze lifting like mist under dawn, revealing the boy who had once offered bread in shadowed kitchens. "Ilara, sister in blood unclaimed," he whispered, his voice cracking like thawing ice. "Forgive the shadow I became, the trials. They devoured our mercy." The Matilda stirred, warriors shifting forms, their growls fading to murmurs as the silver light washed over them, exposing Varrock's web of deceit, bribes to border pacts, sabotaged rites that mocked the lunar balance, all to seize a throne hollowed by ambition. Thorn stepped forward, his wounded frame unbowed, the guilt that had shadowed his melancholy gaze now alchemized into quiet resolve. He placed a hand on Lyrian's shoulder, the gesture heavy with fraternal ache, blood from his ribs dripping onto the snow in ruby petals that the moonlight turned to silver. "The pack is not its traitors," he intoned, his rumble of philosophy etched in pain, eyes meeting Ilara's with a depth that pierced her soul. The ethical king, marked by duty's burdens, finally seeing her not as the unmarked stain, but as the vessel of the goddess's true favor. "We choose compassion over conquest, or we become the beasts we hunt." Varrock thrashed against the ethereal bonds, his snarls devolving into desperate pleas, but the Matilha turned, encircling him with wary steps, their scents aligning once more in the rhythm of renewed oaths. Ilara's heart swelled, a visceral tide of emotion crashing through her, the rejection's old thorns yielding to Renascimento's bloom. Her body alive with the textures of the moment, the sting of wind-lashed cheeks, the metallic warmth of blood on her tongue from bitten lips, the steady press of Thorn's presence grounding her against the gift's overwhelming surge. She released the threads, the light receding into the locket's quiet pulse, and Varrock slumped, defeated not by claws, but by revelation's unyielding truth. The pack howled then, not in triumph but in somber unity, a chorus under the moon that echoed through the iron spine like a prayer for the fallen. Lyrian bowed his head to her, the gesture rippling through the warriors, elders murmuring of the bastard's light as the prophecy fulfilled, the unmarked Omega, born to heal the wound every Alpha King carried. As dawn's first pallor bled into the sky, staining the snow with hues of rose and gold, Thorn drew Ilara close, his arms encircling her with a tenderness born of shared fire. Their lips met in the hush, a kiss not of passion's blaze, but of union's quiet forge, rationalized through trials of fear and curiosity, accepted as the redemption that proved their worth. The kingdom would kneel, not to crowns of iron, but to the compassion she embodied. Thorn, ascending as the ethical sovereign with her at his side, the pathfinder guiding the pack toward a future woven in lunar mercy rather than bloodied conquest. Exile's void had birthed this, rejection transmuted to destiny, love as the ultimate sacrifice of self for the healing of all. In the pass's crimson-streaked silence, with the wind sighing its approval and the moon fading like a sated witness, Ilara felt the Renascimento settle in her bones, a spiritual thaw where faith triumphed over despair and the unmarked became the heart of the realm. The locket cooled against her skin, its silver a symbol of paths chosen, wounds mended, and a bond eternal under the goddess's gaze. What is strength, if not the mercy that crowns the broken? The kingdom stirred below, awaiting their return. The flame of redemption kindled anew in the winter's embrace. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.